Is that working? Yeah, it's working. Okay. The average rate of change on the interval 2 less than or equal to x less than or equal to 5 is negative 1.25. The question is, what's the change in the value of f of x? And this is the average rate of change of f of x with respect to x. So I could say of y equals f of x with respect to x. That's important terminology. And I abbreviated it here, but it's written that way on the test. Okay? Well, on a y versus x graph, the average rate of change is the slope. So the slope would have to be negative 1.25, because that's how your text defines average rate of change. And it's not the way I've always defined it over the years. I've defined it with a verbal definition, change in y divided by change in x. But of course that's exactly the same thing as a slope on a y versus x graph, isn't it? So I'm going to go with the book's definition because we know what to do with slopes and fundamental triangles, I hope. Okay, so this means then that your fundamental triangle it looks like I didn't finish my statement. Has slope negative 1.25. I think it's because a question came up, and conspiracy of the class to distract me. You don't have to do that. I'll do it myself. Okay, fundamental triangle has a slope of negative 1.25. Okay, then 2 less than or equal to x less than or equal to 5. What's that mean? Well, that describes an interval of the x-axis. Okay, so and people had a sketch of that interval. That was good. Now, what was missing was the fact that you have y values and a fundamental triangle. So your fundamental triangle, you don't know how high or how low it is, but you know it runs from x equals 2 to x equals 5, because that's the interval on which we're going to calculate the change. So you have a fundamental triangle, and the fundamental triangle has a negative slope, so let's go ahead and draw a fundamental triangle with a negative slope. And let's call that slope negative 1.25 because, of course, that is the average rate of change, and that's going to be the slope of your fundamental triangle. And what else can we know about the fundamental triangle? Well, people answered, well, the run is 3. Okay, so yeah. So the run is 3 and the slope is negative 1.25. Can we find the rise? So this question leads to this picture, which leads to the task of finding the rise when you know the run and the slope. Now this can still be a little confusing, so let's see how this comes about. What's the relationship among rise and run and slope? Well, slope is rise divided by run. In this case, we know the rise, we're trying to find the rise, but we know the slope and the run, so the run is 3. Slope is negative 1.25, and now we have a simple equation: rise divided by 3 equals negative 1.25. Now, to many people, it's going to be very obvious then that we solve this by multiplying both sides by 3, getting a rise of 3 times negative 1.25, and that would be negative 3.75. Some people were a little fuzzy on this because, again, the algebra, it can be somewhat challenging, especially when you learn it by superstition rather than rules. Okay, but you need the superstition so you have some inkling of what to do with the rules. I'm not sure what the best way to sort that out is, and clearly our education system in this country doesn't either. So they're at least as good as I am. Okay, so rise over 3 is negative 1.25. Multiply both sides by 3. This is an equation. You got an equal sign there, right? So it's perfectly legal to multiply this side by 3. As long as you multiply this side by 3, you will still have a true statement. So you say 3 times rise over 3 equals 3 times negative 1.25. Now, that was still a little daunting. Did you get 3 times rise over 9? What do you get here? Well, let's be really careful then. If we're a little confused and not sure what this means is, this is, you're multiplying basically two fractions. You can write 3 as 3 over 1 and rise over 3 as rise over 3. So let's write both of these factors as fractions, okay, as rational numbers or whatever. So that's 3 over 1 times rise over 3. And of course the right-hand side, that will be the left-hand side because 3 is the same as 3 over 1. And the right-hand side, we can multiply that out. And if I give you $1.25 and do that 3 times, you know you get $3.75. So 3 times 1.25 is certainly 3.75. And since you have the negative on the one quantity, you get the negative there. Okay, so the right-hand side is easy. And if you have to use a calculator, as you would if the numbers were a little weirder, that would be fine too. Okay, but you really ought to be able to do that multiplication in your head. Okay, so 3 over 1 times rise over 3. How do we simplify that? And, well, somebody said, well, you get 3 over 3. Well, yeah, you do. And times the rise. Or if you want, times rise over 1. But in any case, 3 over 3 gives you 1. 1 times the rise is just the rise. So we have rise equals negative 3.75. Now, the rise is what? It's the change in y. But y equals f of x, so the rise is your change in f of x. That's what you're trying to find. So, you know, immediately it would be good if you would understand that the change in f of x is the change in y, which is the rise. Okay? But that takes a little sorting out. This is not trivial. Okay, so change in y is a change in f of x, so f of x changes by negative 3.5. Since, again, the rise, which is negative 3.5, is the change in y, which is the change in f of x. So change in f of x is negative 3.75.